Um, I have about 7 minutes after 7. We're a little bit late starting, so let's kick it off. We're going to call to order our hearing on 16 Amer Road, Milton, Massachusetts. My name is John Leonard. I'm chairman of the Board of Appeals. And with me this evening are two distinguished members of the board, Giselle Joffer and Brian Conley. The applicant is represented by attorney Jesse Schomer, who's here. And Mr. Schomer, I think my notes indicate that you had a witness from MDM Transportation scheduled to testify regarding traffic and site access. Is that still the case?
Yes, it is, Mr. Chair.
Okay, and once you offer that witness, do you have any other witnesses that you're going to be presenting this evening?
No, Mr. Chair, nothing for direct testimony tonight, although we do have our architect from Embark Architecture. It's our understanding that Mr. Bomer is in attendance tonight and is planning to discuss his letter that was filed this morning. We've received that and have started to review it. So we wanted to make sure our architects were on the line in case there were any questions or there could be a direct conversation that takes place through you, Mr. Chair.
That sounds great. Let me just, for the record, indicate that we did receive from Mr. Cliff Bomer of Davis Square Architects a preliminary architectural review of the subject property. And it's dated April 5, 2022. It's on file with the papers on the board's website for any person who likes to deal and review the actual submittal by Mr. Bomer. Mr. Bomer is recently back from Europe. We welcome him back into the United States. And why don't we proceed, Mr. Schomer, with your MDM transportation expert? We'll be delighted to hear from him or her.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Tonight, testifying from MDM Transportation will be Dan Dumay. And just to give you just a brief history on the status of this issue before Dan takes over. As I believe we mentioned at the previous hearing, we've had one meeting so far with Chief Madden of the Milton Fire Department, and I believe, if I remember correctly, Sean Reardon was also in attendance at that meeting, and Tim Zerwinski may have been as well. We have also had a chance to review Sean Reardon's peer review letter. We have not at this point made any substantive project changes because we were waiting for Mr. Bomer's letter to come in, so we'll be looking forward to hearing his remarks tonight and incorporating those as we move forward. In terms of site access, one new document that Dan will be going through tonight, and this is a draft form that we would like to have an opportunity to run by Chief Madden and Mr. Reardon again before finalizing it, is an updated auto turn analysis of the site, which takes into account the addition of a one-way entry point from Truman Parkway, from the intersection there, which was that was a request of Chief Madden, I believe, also mentioned in Mr. Reardon's letter. So that's the one new document that Mr. Dumay will be going through tonight. The rest is intended to focus on the traffic generation and access study that his firm prepared with the original site layout and design. And as you may recall, Mr. Chair, the reason why we wanted to move to traffic tonight is because of the outstanding issues with respect to the site based on Mr. Reardon's letter and our expectation that there would be forthcoming comments from Mr. Bomer. But those issues would not necessarily be affected by the traffic study in terms of the generation and the demand for this project. So with those remarks, Mr. Chair, if I may, I'll turn things over to Mr. Dumay from MDM for him to go through his report in greater detail and update the board on the updated potential site access arrangement.
Great, thank you very much, Mr. Dumay. The floor is yours. Welcome to the Board of Appeals.
Good evening, everyone. Dan Dumay with MDM Transportation Consultants, Senior Project Manager. With your permission, I'll share the screen and we'll get going.
Thank you.
So everybody should see the study locations map up here on the board. If you need me to zoom in or anything, Chair, just let me know and I'll do my best to zoom in and out so it can be, everybody can kind of read it, but the site is here, corner of Amber, Brush Hill, Truman Parkway, and Brush Hill Road. You can see across the street is the multi-use path along the Truman Parkway, Brush Hill Road. There's the MBTA route 716 along Route 138 over here. In the study intersections, primarily the site driveway on Amber Road and the adjacent intersection of Truman Parkway, Brush Hill, and Amber Road. So we went out pre-pandemic, it was October 2019, and collected traffic data at the study intersection. We counted 7 to 9 in the morning, 4 to 6 in the evening. Those are the peak commuter periods, as well as 24-hour traffic counts on Amber Road to get volume and speed of that roadway. As I indicated, these traffic counts were done pre-pandemic in 2019. So we did do an adjustment, a yearly growth of 0.5% for 2 years to bring these up to a baseline 2021 conditions. The road characteristics is for Amber Road. The top one over here shows the daily volumes of the road is just over 1,100 vehicles per day. So it's a fairly low volume roadway. Peak hour volume, two-way traffic, 140 in the morning and 90 in the afternoon. And then it is split between the northwest towards the Parkway in the morning. So people are cutting through from 138 over to the Parkway, and then going about 60% going southeastbound towards 138 in the afternoon. So those are pretty manageable numbers along the roadway, but it's higher in the morning than the evening. We also collected speed data out there. Regulatory speed 25, and we got an average speed 27, 26, and 85th percentile just above 30 miles an hour. So that's what we use for the sight lines for the driveway. We looked at the crash history of the adjacent intersection. When we started the study, we got 2014 data, and we've expanded it from when we filed in October of 2021 to be 2020 data. So these are the number of crashes per year. There's 14 total over the 7 years, which averages about 2 per year at that location. It's, as you can see up here, we calculated what's called a crash rate, which can be compared to other intersections of unsignalized intersections within this district. This is Mass Highway District 6. So the average rate from unsignalized location is 0.52 up here. And this intersection calculated is 0.37 for the crash rate, which is below the state average. We also looked if it was a high crash location. It's a HSIP location, which is a highway safety improvement eligible location if it's within the top 5% within that region. In this case, this intersection is not listed as the latest 2017 to 2019 HSIP. It's below average as well. So no real crash history at this location as far as we can tell. We looked at the project in terms of the total number of units. We got 4 single family units, and we looked at 12 multifamily units. And we used the industry standard trip rates for ITE trip generation. We did our study, we used the 10th generation numbers. This first column here is the single family home trips, low apartments, and then I'll give you the total at the end. Again, we looked at the morning peak hour, the evening, and then a daily over 24 hours. So you can see the combined project is going to make about 10 vehicle trips during the peak hours, slightly higher exiting in the morning, higher entering in the evening, and then about 126 total trips over the course of a day. You break that down for the 16 units, it's about 8 vehicle trips, about 4 in, 4 out per unit. It's pretty standard across the industry, as well as data we have for similar type projects within the Commonwealth. We didn't take any credit for it, but we did look at census data to figure out what percentage of people are using alternative transportation modes within this census tract out here. So this is the immediate census tract within this section of Milton. Is about 35% are using non-single Oxby vehicle auto use per the census data. It was broken down, about 13% use transit, about 13% did either a walk, bike, or work from home. And there's about 9% of the people use carpool. For our analysis purposes, we remain a little bit conservative. We did not take any credit for any of those alternative modes of transportation. So we use the 9, the 11 in our peak hour numbers here. So these are 2028 build traffic volumes. So these are volumes that are projected 7 years into the future. So we use the background growth rate, 0.5% per year for 7 years, based on Mass DOT continuous count station data in the area. We've used journey to work data to figure out where the people from this development, where they're going to go to work. And the data indicated that the majority of the people are going to go to and from and called like the north towards the Boston. And then the other small percentages, Truman Parkway, Amber Road over to 138. And then in the afternoon, mostly coming back, but from the north again, the Truman Parkway, Amber Road, just a couple of trips. A very manageable number of trips here. They're broken down, well managed. You probably wouldn't even notice them within the networks away from the immediate site driveway. So we ended up doing is we did a baseline condition, a no build in the future without the project, and a build condition. These are capacity analysis. I'll zoom in a little bit on each one so you can see this top graph is the morning. The capacity analysis for the morning, which would basically at the Brush Hill Road, and then the second column is for the site driveway. So you can see if you get to the no build and build conditions, the exit from Brush Hill, Amber Road onto the Parkway, level of service C, so that's an average delay. The delay goes from A to F with 19 seconds. Level of service C is an average overall delay. It's very well operating. And then the site drive itself has got a very minimal delay coming out, less than 10 seconds delay for each vehicle in the morning. And then for the afternoon, there's not as many people exiting Amber and Brush Hill, so you get level of service B, very minor delay there. Main line on the Parkway, Brush Hill Road are going to remain at level of service A, less than 5 seconds delay, really no delay on there. And then the site driveway will continue to operate level of service A as well. So in terms of overall operations, this will operate very well. No capacity problems, very low generator. Easily accessible to walk to the transit as well as the adjacent bike path. Like was indicated by Mr. Schumer, we've looked at an access along the Brush Hill Road for the fire, and it's going to be a full access to allow all non-emergency vehicles as well to enter the site. So the fire chief liked that operation. He liked to be able to go in, park his vehicle somewhere in the middle of the site, either attend to the fire or deal with the situation on the site and then exit back out either to Amber Road or be able to go out to 138 back to his where he came from. We had a preliminary conversation with Chief Madden. This is a suggestion, and we like the idea. It gets rid of the gate that we had here at the end, which required every time an emergency vehicle came in, they were going to come in Amber Road and they would have to use that gate every single time. So Chief really liked that, and I think it really addresses the problem. Also allowing an entrance here, there's nobody going to be exiting onto Brush Hill Road, so it'll be very well managed, and it'll give a nice secondary access into the site. So kind of the summary here, we got alternative area transportation. It's about 35% for the area. We didn't take any credit for it, but it's pretty walkable to the adjacent multi-use path and the MBTA bus line on 138. Nominal trip increases, 10 or less peak hour trips per peak hours. No change in overall level of service in the future conditions with and without the project, no real change. The sidewalks are going to connect to building entrances and parking areas. We have a sidewalk along the frontage on both Amber Road and Brush Hill Road, connecting to the existing sidewalk system. We have bike racks for residents and visitors. We've gone over the design of the driveway with the project team to make sure it meets safety criteria for sight lines, emergency vehicle access. We'll maintain the sight lines to maintain the visibility. And we also kind of looked at, I didn't mention yet, but we also looked at the parking ratio, 31 spaces out there. It's 2 spaces per single unit. So 1 in the garage and 1 in the driveway. And then it'd be 1.92 spaces per unit for the townhomes. It's well above the industry standard average. So that'll accommodate your DoorDash deliveries, your Amazon deliveries, visitors, and other stuff well within that ratio of the 1.92. I think it's very well situated. The last point before I kind of open it up to questions of the board, at the preliminary hearing, I know it was brought up. I'll go back to the first. It was brought up about looking at a potential crosswalk across the Brush Hill, Truman, across the boulevard. We looked at it, and for the number of units, it's not really advisable, in our opinion, that this project would build that, since 800 feet to the north, there's already an existing crossing, so that gives them good access to the path. And then they can go up one street, I believe it's Chafer Street, and they go across, and you can walk down to the existing bus on 138. So it's our opinion that a project of this size and kind of location, that it didn't really warrant the extensive build out of what it would take to build that crossing. So just kind of wanted to address that. I think that was kind of the major one. So I'll open up to the board, and I'm happy to go into more depth on anything you want more discussion on, if you have any questions.
Great, thanks, Mr. Dume. We appreciate your presentation. Why don't we start off with Sean Reardon. Sean, do you have any questions of Mr. Dume?
Yeah, a couple quick questions. So thanks, Dan.
Sure.
Do you have any plans to do anything about the fact that there's no crossing, no pedestrian crossing of Brush Hill Road? So the Brush Hill Road section that's on the project side of Truman Parkway. So right now, there's no way to cross from one sidewalk on Brush Hill to the opposite side to connect to the sidewalks heading, I guess it would be west on Truman Parkway.
Yes, that was what I was just talking about there. So I'll bring up the intersection. So the fact there's no crossing for over here.
No, I'm talking
This
about
side.
no crossing across Brush Hill Road. So if I'm coming out of your project,
Correct.
heading east, heading west, there's
Yep.
no way for us to get across Brush Hill Road to get to the sidewalk on the opposite side of the street. So I know you guys are proposing a crosswalk at Amer, right?
There's existing ramps there, and I don't believe it's marked. There's a ramp panel there, and there's a ramp panel over here.
But all that's going to be reworked as part of your construction project, right?
As part of the project, we're going to put in the sidewalk along Amer Road and then around the corner.
Okay. So if you rotate again, rotate your view again, if you wouldn't mind.
Is it that one?
So right there, there's no way people can go up Brush Hill, but there's no way to get across Brush Hill.
Over here?
Right. Did you get addressing that in any way?
We have not looked at that. That sidewalk actually does not go anywhere. It ends right here. And then if I go to the aerial, actually if I go over here, the other side, it doesn't actually go out anywhere. It ends like right here. It ends very short to the west is basically what happens. So that it doesn't really provide any benefit of a connection.
So could you just go down, just show me where that is? I didn't see it when I first looked at it.
So it ends like somewhere like around here.
Can you zoom down in Street View and just show me where that is?
Yeah. And it's right here at this hydrant before this first house. So the intersection's right there.
Okay.
And it's not really it's kind of tucked in the bushes.
And there's no crossing of Truman, right?
No.
Yeah.
Not at that location. It's located about 800 feet to the north. The existing crossing is right here at Aberdeen Road. And that has a RRFB crossing.
And that's where the fatality was, right?
Prior to the RFB and the crossing going, there was no crossing there at the time. And there was no RFB either.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's the location.
And then, Mr. Chairman, just want to sort of agree with Dan. Clearly, this project is a small generator, so I wouldn't expect there to be any capacity issues or any impacts due to volumes. But this is we just need to recognize this is a really odd intersection with a lot of unique characteristics. You know, a lot of weird pedestrian activity, I wouldn't say weird pedestrian activity, but just, you know, it's a very atraditional intersection, so it needs to be treated sort of sensitively. It's not going to fit within a regular normal, you know, analysis regime. So we just got to make sure we're sensitive to all this stuff, and we'll try to keep an eye on everything. Then one more quick question. So Dan, is the proposal on the new access off of Brush Hill Road, is that access for everybody, enter only?
That'll be access for everybody, enter only, no gate, no nothing. So anybody can go in there, correct?
And then is the driveway intended to function as a two-way or as a one-way circulation?
The Amber Road will be a two-way, and then in here, this part will be two-way, and then the driveway will be signed for one-way with do not enter.
Okay.
And I believe we try to narrow it down. We have about 16 feet today is what we propose. Try to keep it tight, make sure the fire truck can fit in, but narrow it down, put a nice small corner radii on here.
Yep.
And I believe the idea is to try to do some type of driveway apron to give preference to the pedestrians going across there. Try to slow everybody down, I think was the idea. But those details haven't really been fully worked out yet.
And are you planning on, it's a really odd intersection striping pattern. Are you planning on doing any sort of intersection striping to reinforce that entry or to clarify that entry?
Beyond the markings that are there today.
Correct.
We were not planning on anything. It has a striped edge line out here, so that turn lane would be in the shoulder.
Right. I guess the issue that we have is just there's a sea of pavement out there, in an already sort of oddly oriented intersection. So we just want to see if there's anything that we can do from striping to make sure that your driveway entrance doesn't add to the confusion at that intersection.
Yeah, we can work with you guys on
Okay.
in the town on something to make that better with striping and markings. And we're also thinking potentially some signs to point people to where that pedestrian crossing would be. So if they want to get to the path coming out of the site, you put a directional sign for them to kind of give them a base of which way to go.
I think my principal concern there is people coming into the site from Truman Parkway, you know, could be carrying some speed through a zone that's kind of difficult to navigate, right? That Brush Hill Road, Amber Road intersection is tough. And if we now give, so what we're doing is we're adding a little bit of confusion as to the trajectory of the cars heading eastbound on Truman Parkway. So just, we need to be sensitive to that.
Yeah, we could take a look at that for sure.
Okay. That's it for me, Chairman Leonard. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Reardon. Brian Connolly, board member, do you have any questions of Mr. Dumay?
I actually see Mr. Zawinski's hand raised, so we'd love to hear any feedback he has.
Oh, okay, do you want to just reserve your time to listen?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay, that's great. I don't see hands on my particular setup here. So, Mr. Zawinski, do you want to be heard and ask any questions of Mr. Dumay?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Connolly. Always looking out for me. I appreciate it. I did have just a quick question. First of all, when I had first seen the proposed redesign of that access on Brush Hill Road, I do agree that it's preferable to the gate. I think we'll need to take a real close look at it to make sure it kind of functions the way we all hope it's going to function. But I do think it is a much preferable solution to some of the other options. I always prefer a kind of a physical design solution, which tends to be self-enforcing. The question that I had, and this may have come up either in the PEL period or at some point, is the project going to require an access permit from the state for opening up onto Brush Hill Road, Truman Parkway over there?
So the project would require a DCR access permit.
Okay. So that may be something, to Sean's point about the striping, and I do agree we'll want to kind of do our best to try to figure out a scheme that makes it as rational and clear and coherent as possible. We may need to, work together with DCR on that in terms of aligning any kind of, they've got their stripes on their road, we've got our stripes on our road. So, with this project being sort of the common entity, I think we'll want to work together between our folks and the state's folks, whatever kind of process that involves. I don't profess to know, but we'll want to make sure that there's coordination there.
And Tim, our hope is that we could reclaim some maybe green space in that intersection, if possible.
It is a parkway, it would be nice. That's all I have for now, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Tim. We appreciate. Let me just rotate my witness comment list here. Mr. Ballmer, do you have any comments on the traffic presentation of Mr. Dume?
Well, I think it definitely appears to help some of the safety issues, for the emergency access, for sure. It doesn't address some of the issues that I talk about in my letter, that have more to do with the tightness of the plan, particularly east to west, and other kind of on-site issues that affect the residents that aren't safety issues. So it looks to me like an improvement from what was there. I think it addressed Mr. Reardon's issues about the gated entry.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Conley, have you thought of any questions you want to ask?
Just wanted to thanks. That was a very helpful presentation, and thanks to Sean, who asked some of the questions that were on my mind. Sean, you just hinted something on my mind about reclaiming some land for space and talking about how kind of open and confusing that intersection is. And I'm wondering, maybe if you can zoom in, is there an opportunity as part of the new entrance you're creating for the property to make improvements to how the intersection lays out, to make it, less busy than it is right now and clearer for how the lane should work? And is this an opportunity to make some sensible improvements to the overall intersection?
I think it is. I'd like that to be the challenge, and not just sort of equity to just leaving it as is. But I think we got to vet that out.
And to ask Dan, I mean, have you explored, what improvements you could make that would be reasonable for, a project of your size that would increase safety and, help people understand this confusing intersection any better?
Yeah, so we took a look at it. Put up the arrow so we can see it. Took a look at trying to make the crossing. So I think to get a crossing to work, you'd have to narrow down the intersection that you said to get some green space in there. The problem then becomes you start chasing all the ramp panels around. Once we start touching one handicap ramp, you're probably gonna have to build all of them, which ends up changing the geometry of the entire intersection. It becomes like chasing a wormhole of funds at that point, I think.
Yeah, and I don't think what we're talking about is exclusive to getting a pedestrian crossing of Truman Parkway. It's the question is,
Yep.
Is there something we can do to arrange that intersection more efficiently, so that when we add in your new movement off of Truman Parkway, that maybe there's a way to sort of reorganize what's happening there, maybe reclaim some pavement into green space? Have you looked at that? We're just talking from not setting the pedestrian access across Brush Hill Road aside, that just the reworking of that intersection. Had you looked at any of that?
We have. So we'd have to break out what our price would be to do something like that, and what the benefit would be over just striping. So we could definitely look into that.
I mean, the nice thing about just looking at the striping sort of forecasts where other opportunities might be. So I think that's probably a good sequence of events, is look at what sort of striping improvements we can make to organize the intersection and organize the movements. Then that will probably trend towards, well, if the striping shows this, why can't we do this with the space that we're not striping as travel road. So
I would
maybe-
agree. It would probably look very similar to what you could stripe. You'd have to
Yep.
put a shoulder at like the same spot versus a curb and those details. You have to make sure there's no major utilities in the way or anything like that. So we haven't looked at it that close. So we can definitely look closer into it. We understand the comment in the concern from both the peer review and the town. So we'll take that under advisement for sure.
I guess it seems like the takeaway from your study is we do no harm. But I wonder if you have an opportunity here for a story that is we make things better. And I think it'd be worth exploring that.
Yeah,
I
and
mean, we'll take that back to the client and come up with some ideas and look at some potential solutions and see what we can do.
And Brian, I'm not so convinced the do no harm thing is true yet.
Okay.
In part because if you can imagine, it's already a confusing intersection. Now we introduce a movement that takes people off of Truman Parkway, puts them on a trajectory to the front entrance, which takes them through sort of that dead zone that traditionally isn't traveled as part of the people on Truman Parkway. So
Right. So now you have cars that instead of just continuing north, start to veer east toward the property, right? In a way that doesn't happen today.
Yeah,
Right.
and through an area where Amer and Brush Hill are sort of merging just through osmosis, right? So there's a lot of weird things going on at that location.
Because now that we've opened up the entrance to Brush
Yeah.
Hill, right? That's the change. And it
Yeah.
has been a response to the public safety concern, but it's introduced some more complexity to a difficult intersection.
Agreed.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's all I have for now.
Okay, thank you, Brian. Giselle Joffer, do you have any questions of Mr. Dumay or comments you want to make?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do. Thank you, Dan, very much for the presentation. I'm hoping that you can help me understand a little bit better the ideal pedestrian sort of exit and entry to the property. So is it contemplated that families will leave out of the same sort of entry and exit as the automobiles, or is there a separate gateway for pedestrians?
So the pedestrians connection to the existing sidewalks can be in this area here.
Okay, so would that be a sort of a separate pedestrian gate or just an opening?
It'll just be a open sidewalk connection to the existing sidewalk that's along Brush Hill Road. And then for the driveway, they're going to bring it in and hopefully do some treatment to make it pedestrian friendly and short of a crossing as possible. And then it would wrap around all the way down Amber Road through the site frontage on that side.
Okay, so if you're living in one of the single family homes, you would cross over to that walkway.
Or you can come out your front door here
Okay,
directly. Or if you go out through the garage, you'd have to go across the lot and then you could go that way as well.
okay,
But they would have an access right from their front doors here and you could go around and up.
okay. But that sidewalk doesn't go all the way around. It ends at.
It's gonna end at the driveway. Correct.
Okay.
So for the so back to the map here, they would exit onto Brush Hill Road and you go up to this next street to get over to 138, or you could go up and cross over to that multi-use path on this side, or you can continue up Brush Hill Road itself, depending on where they're going.
And then the reverse, if you're in the apartment buildings and you're trying to get to Amar Road.
So that those people would come out here and you go down and around.
Okay. So you just have to sort of cross the entryway.
You cross that entry driveway, correct?
Got it. Okay. Thank you. I just wanted some clarity on that.
Thanks,
I
Giselle.
mean, can I just one follow-up question? I'm glad
Sure.
to still ask this. I guess I misunderstood the plan. I think if people who live in the apartments want to go to Amor Road, they're not going to do a big loop out to Brush Hill and come back. I guess I had thought that was a sidewalk, but there's no walkway on the, I guess it'd be the east boundary. And if there's not, could there be a walkway so that someone who wants to head toward the parks, for example, do they have to walk in the driveway to get out to Amor Road?
I would defer to the civil on that, but that's something we can definitely look at. There's connection right in here.
Yeah, I guess I thought that was a sidewalk, but I guess I'm looking at it now, or a walkway. But it looks like, what is that? Is that grass and then a driveway?
Yeah, I believe it's just green space.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's no sidewalk proposed right now. This is Paul with Allen and Major Associates. I know one of Sean Reardon's comments, he talked about connecting there, so we're still reviewing that possibility. But as of right now, there is no sidewalk connecting the existing sidewalk or the proposed sidewalk on Alma Road to the townhouses up top.
Thank you.
Okay, Attorney Corcoran, do you have any questions of Mr. Dumay?
Yes, I do. Thank you. Dan, would you go back to the aerial view? So I agree generally that the volumes are not significant. But I think, but I agree also with Mr. Reardon that you're introducing at least one new move in a intersection that's confusing. I think you're going to introduce another one that's even more risky, and that is they're introducing a new driveway access off of Brush Hill Road into this property, one that doesn't exist today. You're bringing in 16 units with 1 to 2 cars per unit. My sense is that a fair number of folks who are coming from Boston are likely to come west on Brush Hill Road and make a U-turn at that intersection in order to be able to turn into that driveway. And I think that creates a real safety issue that ought to be evaluated. I'm wondering whether you've talked to the police chief and the police about that, the nature of that maneuver. I'm very familiar with that intersection. I know that traffic, the issue that Mr. Reardon raised with traffic merging from Brush Hill Road onto Brush Hill Road and merging into traffic coming from Truman Highway heading easterly. I think that traffic is used to cars going on at a constant speed. Now that you're going to have vehicles that will be slowing and turning into the property, just as vehicles coming out of the stop sign at Brush Hill Road will be speeding up. And so I'm wondering whether you evaluated that and also discussed that with the police chief.
We have not discussed it with the police chief. The curb cuts along the parkway in general are made for U-turn movements. So I don't necessarily see a problem with it. You'd make a U-turn and then go into the shoulder and go into the site. But we can look at it further and see if the chief has had any history of issues with that.
Yeah, I think currently the maneuver that's being made there would be a left turn crossing Brush Hill Road to enter Amor Road. But it will be a new maneuver, I think, making a U-turn to get to that driveway opening. And that's a very short distance to travel to get to that new driveway opening. My second question is, do you know how wide Amor Road is?
Not off the top of my head, but I can estimate it for you.
And my sense is it's fairly narrow, and there are no sidewalks on either side.
About 22 feet on that section.
22 feet in width. Do you know what? And I know that they're proposing new sidewalk there, which I assume would be accessible, so therefore at least 4 feet or 5 feet in width. Do you know how much of the Amor Road right of way would be taken up with that installation of the new sidewalk, if at all?
I don't. We're not narrowing the road. It would go adjacent to that curb line.
So
Would be
it's not, it's staying outside of the existing paved area.
correct.
Okay. And with 4 new single-family units marched along the frontage of that property, my sense is that at least some visitors, if not many, most visitors are going to try to park on Amor Road as opposed to turning into the site to look for parking in a fairly tight parking area. So it strikes me that has the potential to significantly, effectively narrow the width of Amor Road as you're approaching a very interesting and confusing intersection.
The on-site parking is ample at the levels provided. It's almost 2 per unit, even with the townhouse units. We could put up no parking signs, and that could be enforced if the town would like that.
That seems to me to be somewhat unrealistic, but that, maybe signage can help.
I mean, I don't know if it happens anywhere else on the road, but there is ample parking on the site, so there's no justification for people just parking along the road because they're too lazy to park in a wide open spot.
And will you be designating specific spaces for visitors and for deliveries?
I'm not sure. I'd have to defer to the team on that one.
I think, Sean, we haven't quite made that decision yet. I think that determination is down the road, and as we move through the process, if there's discussion of a site parking management plan, we can certainly take that into consideration. I've seen a lot of projects where the parking spaces may be decoupled from the units themselves to discourage everyone from having 2 vehicles, and then in that case you can designate some guest spaces. But we'll explore that as we move through the process, I think.
My last question is that Mr. Reardon in his report recommends a road safety audit. Are you preparing to perform one?
As far as we know, the road safety audit is no longer warranted because it's not a high crash location anymore. So I don't know if it's something that the town would still want to do a road safety audit type of report, where it wouldn't be. I don't know if the state would participate or not, since it's not no longer a high crash location. It's definitely not eligible for any funding anymore at this point. So we could work with the town to see if they'd want to do some type of safety audit of it. I don't know if it would be a true road safety audit through the state, because I don't know if they would participate.
Seems to me that some sort of a detailed safety analysis ought to be performed based on the proposed new traffic movements here. That's all I have. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thanks, Ned. Mr. Schulman, is there any cleanup questions you want to ask Mr. Dumay, or are you content with the testimony?
I'm content with the testimony. We appreciate everyone's feedback, especially we know that the new site access drawing was new to everyone, and I'll make sure to have this presentation filed in the morning with Crystal so that everyone can review it in detail. With respect to the other materials that Dan presented, all of that is in his firm's traffic study, and most of the information is also in the executive summary, which was in the application binder, and all of that is on the town's website for this project. So the information that's presented tonight is available for anyone who would like to review it in greater detail. Appreciate the short notice feedback from Tim and Sean and Cliff especially. I think it's a great suggestion that we have the idea of moving forward with working with the town and with DCR to figure out how to make this intersection work most optimally. An intersection like this, I think, is obviously, when you take a look at it, it sort of the possibilities for conflicts with an intersection like this immediately pop up, given all the different directions traffic is coming from and the unusual orientation of it. And something like that is a larger scope than a project like this, but I think we're certainly part of the conversation about that. So I appreciate the suggestion and look forward to having that discussion with Tim and Sean, and hopefully we can get somebody from DCR on the call as well.
I hope so too. Do you have any other affirmative evidence you want to be introducing tonight, Mr. Showman?
No, not tonight. Thank you.
Okay, great. Mr. Palmer. There's Judy. Hi, Judy. How are you? Welcome aboard.
Thank you.
Mr. Palmer, do you want to proceed with your presentation?
Sure. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I think my letter was relatively brief, but I think interestingly, one part of the letter that I deferred until later has made me think, and I'm only suggesting this because we've worked with this development team on a number of occasions and have had, I think, really good luck with exploring alternative options that I think often end up as win-win scenarios. I think that independent from the safety issues, that I do see that one-way entry as solving one issue, although just from the conversation over the last half hour, it's also brought up a lot of questions, even potentially identifying the need for further analysis to really figure out if there are repercussions outside of the servicing of that site that would need to be addressed by changing that circulation pattern. So I think I'll take a step back. The part that I left out of my analysis was really about neighborhood texture and the context of the neighborhood and existing patterns of development, the things that I think we know help a development fit in at the very least. And I think there's a lost opportunity on a couple of fronts. I think the thread that I carried through my report was a little bit of frustration. I understand why it is the way it is, but a little bit of frustration of how tightly squeezed the development is, particularly in the east-west direction. It's pushing on the west side. It's changing the setbacks from the street. So while the idea of having those 4 individual single-family homes can make some sense, they really aren't quite in the pattern of the development. Actually, as I pointed out in the letter, the buildings themselves are actually smaller in footprint than many of the other buildings on Ammer Road, and the space between them is much tighter. And the problem that it has kind of created is one that we've talked about on other developments and with this developer as well, is that because there is no real usable outdoor space on the side due to slope and kind of that dense packing of the development, I would think there are opportunities available by looking at ways that some of the open space that is shown in the plan could be consolidated to create some meaningful outdoor space, even though there won't be dozens of children. I think there are only something like 23 sort of additional bedrooms that could be bedrooms for children. They are all family units. They're 3-bedroom and 4-bedroom units. So there will certainly be kids who could use space, not to mention adult residents who might want a place to go out and grill things and just socialize. So my feeling is that there are, looking at that, going back to the texture of the neighborhood, I think what's interesting as you move to the east, Ammer Road is really a kind of a boundary road. To the east, the density increases kind of drastically, actually. And even along Brush Hill Road, The homes to the east are much more tightly spaced, and to the west, less so. So Ammer Road is really the last road of very spacious sites, big setbacks, a lot of space in between the buildings, and medium to large sized homes. And I think that it would really be worth looking at reorienting the buildings on the site. I'm thinking the building that's northernmost on the site could be rotated 90 degrees. That could open up, so it's running parallel to Brush Hill Road. It could open up space between that building and the other multifamily building on the site, as well as providing some relief to the neighbor to the east. I think that I did note that because of this tightness east to west, there's really no space for landscape buffering between the long, it's over 100 feet long, multifamily building on the north side. The south one's even longer. But I think it's a problem for the neighbor to the east to have a very long wall. It's a couple hundred feet of building plus 30 or 40 feet in between the two buildings. So I guess to kind of cut to the chase, I think there are better options, and I think there are options that could include one-way driveways that come in and out on Ammer Road. I think there are options that could preserve some of the existing plantings along Brush Hill Road. I'm not 100%. I did point out in the report that the project, because of its size, is exempt from a good bit of the Architectural Access Board requirements, but not all of them. It still is required to have group 1 units on the development and access of all of the on-site amenities. And in this case, there are very few because it's so tightly packed on the site, but even getting to the dumpster and the recycling area, it isn't clear to me that there are true accessible paths on the development. We talked about there not being a sidewalk from the parking lot out to Ammer Road. So I think that the way I look at it is that this development could be a really nice kind of transition piece, a sort of bookend to the type of development that is typical on Ammer Road, and an introduction to the different kinds of development that happens along Brush Hill Road to the east. And not to mention, I think if you could solve the issue of circulation of two driveways, one-way driveways onto Ammer Road, it might not open up the complications of making a complicated intersection even more complicated. So I think that's kind of where I'm at. I appreciate the idea of particularly on the single family homes, of using a kind of vernacular that feels comfortable, but at the same time, I look at the space between the homes and see that as not really programmable space. There's quite a bit of slope in between the homes, so I don't think it really would be used. And at the same time, there is no common space on the site. So I'm just a little, I don't even want to say frustrated, because as I said, I've worked with this developer, this architect before, and I know that they're open to looking at different plans, and I'm just not convinced they've landed in the best place on this one. I do think it's possible to maintain this number of units on the development. It may mean a different unit mix a little bit, because in order to create some usable outdoor space, it's possible that the townhouse buildings can't be quite as long as they are. But I'm not even really convinced of that. I think there are other options that should be looked at. And to that point, I would encourage a working session to at least to look at these ideas, make sure that the developer believes that they have the best plan they can do. So I think that's where I'm at. I have 12 or so bullet points at the end that are pretty conventional concerns. Some of them actually resonated with some of the concerns that showed up in Mr. Reardon's report that had to do with cross slope on parking spaces, concern about ledge, the retaining wall. Building the retaining walls very close to property lines. We don't really know exactly how those will be built. So really hoping to talk about construction management, mail delivery, school bus pickup, a lot of very conventional questions that are outlined in the letter that I hope we could discuss, maybe not in this forum unless you have specific questions. So I hope that that makes sense to you. I think the density for me or intensity of use is not quite right now because of that lack of outdoor usable outdoor space, whether it's kid friendly or adult friendly. There's really none there. I think the townhouse, I've said all this in the report, I think the townhouses are uncomfortably close to the parking. I think with even a little bit of overhang of the parked cars onto the sidewalk, it would be really uncomfortable, particularly the at grade townhouses that are on the northern bank of townhouses are at grade entry, very close to the sidewalk. So really no buffering opportunities that would help ensure privacy for the residents in those townhouses. I think these are solvable things, but I think they need to find some slack here to get a little more space to work with on the development, and I think probably reorient some of the buildings to make it work better.
All right, thank you very, very much, Cliff. Let me see if the board members have any questions. Mr. Connolly, do you have any questions of Mr. Bomer?
No questions. I think that was, pretty consistent with a lot of the questions and comments from our prior meeting, and it's, very helpful to get that feedback. So thank you.
Okay, Giselle, do you have any questions of Mr. Bomer?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Bomer. Nice to see you again.
Likewise.
The suggestions that you had, which I confess, like sort of visually, I didn't really follow. But will they help the issues of like limited trash storage or snow space? Will shifting the buildings in the way that you suggest also address some of those concerns?
Well, what I really think, I would hope so, because those are real concerns. So you do need open space for those functions, basic functions on the site. So, what I'm thinking, and the one idea that I mentioned is that if you, rather than building that long north to south wall, which I think is really arguably really negatively impactful to the neighbor to the east, at the very least, and that's the one piece of the proposed development that really is out of scale with anything else in the nearby neighborhood. So I think a couple, even taking that northernmost building, rotating at 90 degrees so it follows Brush Hill. And I think you might even be able to preserve some of the existing growth, potentially move it a little bit closer, because if you look to the east, the buildings on Brush Hill, with the exception the sole exception of the immediate neighbor are actually pushed closer to the street, and opening up some clear space, open space to that neighbor to the east, so that they're really not looking at a long wall of the building. And I think of the other thing that might have to happen, I suggested in the report that rather than thinking about 4 single family homes, those one or both of them, or you could make duplex homes, not use that space in between, just by combining those two. And the way they're designed is that could be done, because 2 of the elevations are garages anyway. So you could actually combine them quite easily and pick up that 20 feet or whatever the space is between those and reallocate that as usable outdoor space. So yeah, I think there are opportunities with some modification in housing type, and certainly modifications in the location of at least one of the townhouse buildings. The southernmost townhouse building is really in the least impactful location, because it's placed south of the main body of the neighbor to the east, and it's also to the east of the neighbor on Amber Road to the south. So it's kind of in the least impactful area. It's also set down a bit. That's where the tallest retaining walls are as well, up in that area. So the height is somewhat mitigated. So that to me is the area where you would think about concentrating massing in the least impactful ways, and then use the rest of the site to deploy the other buildings. Really trying to think for a little while about organizing it with respect to providing some usable outdoor space. And that's not what we're seeing on this plan. I mean, this plan will, as we've seen in many other developments that I think in many of which have gotten much better, that start with an idea of clear cutting the site, making significant changes in the topography of the site. And I think in this case, it pretty much used up all the space. So they're kind of stuck with some issues that I don't see how they're going to solve them. And I think tonight this is really interesting, this idea of that one-way entry, but that opens up other problems too. It's already a really messy intersection, and I'm not sure how that would come out if it were studied more thoroughly.
Thank you. Nothing further.
Thank you, Giselle. Mr. Schomer, do you have any questions or comments you want to make regarding Mr. Boma's testimony?
Just one question, just to make sure we understand the suggestion that we're talking about. Thank you, Mr. Bomer, for the comments. We look forward to another productive working session with yourself and Sean and Tim, and hopefully Judy can make it for that one too. The suggestion to change the orientation of the building, is the building you're referring to the 6-unit townhouse that's closest to Brush Hill Road currently?
Yeah.
And you're
Yeah.
suggesting turning that to 90 degrees so that it's parallel to Brush Hill, more or less in the location that we're talking about tonight for the proposed access?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, that was my question. I just wanted to make sure we understood that. Obviously, that a change like that would render a lot of the discussion from earlier in the meeting moot point if we're eliminating an access there. But certainly something we're willing to explore.
Great. Thank you very, very much. Attorney Corcoran, do you have any questions of Mr. Boma?
No, I was trying to understand that suggestion as well, because it would certainly completely, you'd almost go back to the drawing board with the site.
That's
as
right.
I said the last time, it seems to me the provision of safe and adequate play area is really important. This is going to be mostly young families with young children. And there's no safe place to play. The only place to play currently is the parking lot. So I really think that a lot of work needs to go into reconfiguring the space, thinking about the density of the space, just to create meaningful play area, never mind to address all of Mr. Reardon's concerns relative to impact of utilities, retaining walls, et cetera. There's just, you're right, this site plan is so densely packed. I don't see how you do all of the things that you need to do here to provide adequate stormwater, to provide utilities, to preserve trees. And you still have the potential of significantly impacting trees that exist on the two abutting properties. So those are my comments. I don't know how they reconcile them. I look forward to seeing whether there's a new site plan that would come forward.
Great, thanks, Ned. Tim Zawinski, do you have any questions you want to ask or follow up on any of these issues?
Not at the moment. I would look forward to a working session to maybe kind of put some things on paper. I have a couple thoughts and ideas, but they're too uncooked for public consumption right now. But maybe we can give it a little bit more thought. So definitely appreciate Mr. Bomer's input. And I do agree. I want to, we have had some good outcomes with this team, relative to, the application versus the finished product. So I'm confident that there are solutions to the issues that both Mr. Reardon and Mr. Bomer have raised. So looking forward to rolling up our sleeves on that.
Okay, thanks, Tim. Sean, do you have any comments that you want to make or observations?
No, but I would like to just make one clarification for the purposes of my comment letter. The comments 13 through 16 are not related to this project. So I'm not sure how they snuck in there. I guess I just didn't delete them, but if you could just ignore comments 13 through 16, and 27 is a reproduction of a prior comment. So I apologize, not my best work, but yeah, I figured that should hopefully clarify a few things for people.
Well, thank you for your qualification. We appreciate it very much. I don't believe anybody noticed the need for the qualification, so I think you can rest in peace. But thank you very much.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah.
can we ask if it's possible for Mr. Reardon to just submit a revised letter that kind of deletes those things and maybe acknowledges that the previous draft had? I just want to make sure that the record is kind of complete and not confusing for folks.
I agree with that entirely. I think what we can do is, Mr. Reardon, if you want to submit a substitute letter, once that's been filed, unless there are any objections from the fellow board members, we will strike the original letter that you submitted and substitute in its place instead your revised letter. So we'll have a nice clean record. Is that acceptable to you?
I would very much appreciate that opportunity.
Okay, that's great. We
Thank you.
appreciate you taking the time to revise the letter so that we do have a clear record. That's important. Let me.
Mr. Chair, could I ask one additional question? And this came up from Ned's questions. He reminded me of something else I was curious about, if it pleases the board.
Absolutely, right.
Thank you very much. So Cliff, on the issue of open space on the site, I think you mentioned at one point the possibility of adult programmed open space or children programmed open space. Do you think that the unit bedroom count and unit type plays into that in terms of whether there's a tot lot or something like that, or a dog walk, or what is your thoughts on how best do you think to program a site like this?
Well, thanks for that. It is all 3 and 4 bedroom units, so there certainly are going to be children on the site, and I vote for the children above a dog walk for sure, because there's plenty of neighborhood to walk dogs responsibly. So That, I'm guessing that a small tot lot with some passive, a few benches for adults to observe their children would be a nice addition to it.
Okay.
I think part of the issue, and again, it's this east to west problem, is that the townhouses, that they do have patios, that's for sure, but they're really, really tight. And I guess of marginal utility. So it could be that you have a combination open space with even just one piece of creative play equipment and a grilling area and a couple benches for this size of a development would at least provide some relief for people who need to get out of their home for an hour or something.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Cliff, for that comment. Let me just ask Crystal. Crystal, are there any members of the public who have their hands raised? And
Yeah, before we go to the public, we actually have Mr. Tamposi who has his hand.
oh, okay, fine. Mr. Tamposi, welcome back to the Board of Appeals. We're delighted to hear from you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to clarify for the record that there are 2-bedroom units as well for the townhouses. Believe it's 9 2-bedroom units as well. So, the number of children may be, a little bit lower. So, obviously that could change as we go through, but, just wanted to make sure that we are, mindful of that.
Great.
Yeah, that's totally right. I apologize. That is correct. Yeah, it's 9 2-bedrooms, 3 3-bedrooms, and 4 4-bedrooms.
Okay, thanks for the clarification, Mr. Tamposi. We appreciate that. Crystal, is there anybody out there in virtual land who has a question to ask of Mr. Bomer?
Yes, Sandra De Silva.
Hello.
Hi, Mr. Silva. Would you introduce yourself with your name and address, please?
My name is Sandra De Silva. I live at 37 Amor Road.
Great. Welcome back to the Board of Appeals.
Thank you. I was listening into the conversation and I heard you saying that people would, adults and children would just walk on Cheever Ave. I believe they would more walk on Amor Road, and Amor Road can be a very tricky street, especially first thing in the morning. At 5:30 in the morning, I hear the zooming of cars coming down my road. It always wakes me up like a clock. So keep in mind, there are high school students that would have to walk down Amor Road to get to Milton High, and middle school students who would have to walk down Amor Road to get to the piers. Another thing I want to add is that when I drive down Amor Road to get to Brush Hill Road, there are people who park on the road, and it's a single family house. There are a number. Sometimes I have to pass through 2 cars carefully, and that's a single family house. And what you propose is 16 units in that corner. So right now, I have to carefully get by people. Sometimes they're just looking at their phone or looking something up, and they're parked in that corner. And they're sometimes parked on the opposite side. I don't know why. And then I have to go down, and then I have to try to make a right-hand turn, and I can just see if there's a bottleneck of cars going into the new development. It's going to make it very difficult for myself, my neighbors, to make a right-hand turn onto Brush Hill Road. And then also, please keep in mind, there have been a number of accidents. I don't know if you've looked at Brush Hill Road. There's a picture of a young man that was killed. He was coming down from Truman Highway and slammed into a tree. And also I had consulted my past and have seen the damage to the fence where people have hit that fence on Brush Hill Road. And I was consulting with the former neighbor that used to live on Amor Road, because I remember seeing tire marks on her grass from when somebody was speeding down and drove up on her grass. They have hit her fence a couple of times, and I've seen her had to repair it. Not just her, they have also driven up on 17 Amor Road. That's the house across from 16 Amor Road. They smashed into a tree. The tree was in front of Justin's bedroom. They only damaged the tree and they had to cut the tree down. That is what you're proposing is our street size is 16 units and you're gonna double it in one corner. And you're saying that people are gonna be lazy. If you don't think people are going to be lazy and park in the wrong spots, they park in the wrong spots now. We're dealing with the problem now, and it's one family. One family times 16, it's gonna be even more congested. I can just imagine them parking badly all the time. It's very hard to go past all those cars to just make a turn, much less try to make a left turn onto Truman Highway. Sometimes when I'm coming from Truman Highway from the supermarket and I'm trying to turn onto Amor Road, people seem to be at it seems to be like we're stuck. You can't tell who's coming or who's going. It gets very overwhelming. And now you're adding a level of complexity if I'm turning onto my street. Now I will stop and slow down, but there's some people who just make that right turn onto Amor Road, zoom up and flying, and it is very scary for us. The street has changed over the years from when I was a kid. It used to be a quiet street, and now it's a cut-through street. And I don't even find it safe for my children to walk. So you have to also realize that this street has changed. Yes, every once in a while, it just takes a few bad drivers, which we have had because they've driven up on Mrs. Spriggs' yard and on 16 Amor Road. So what you're doing is making it a very dangerous place. I can just imagine somebody slamming in to that the 4 units, one of those 4 units, and we might lose a life. It is a dangerous area to put the houses so much in front. There's no setback. I can just see somebody careening right onto that lawn. It's happened before, and most likely it will happen again.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Silva. We appreciate your comments. Kristen, Crystal, is there any other person out there who has their hand raised and has a question for Mr. Ballmer?
There is. Hold on one second. Is it Lee? What's your
Lyra.
first? Lyra?
Yes,
And what's your address?
295 Brush Hill Road.
Okay.
Good. Do you have a question for Cliff Ballmer, ma'am?
It's not so much of a question, although built into my comment would be many questions, because just having lived.
Ma'am, hold on for 1 second here.
Yeah.
We're dealing with Mr. Ballmer's testimony, and we're not generally taking questions and statements.
Okay, then I'll get the question to him.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Are any provisions being made that don't currently exist? Because having lived on Brush Hill Road, people frequently come down Amor, and if you need to turn onto Brush Hill, it's a very tight U-turn right there. It's a dangerous maneuver because you're making a turn onto like what's oncoming traffic coming down Truman Parkway. And even now, we see people making that U-turn on the wrong side of Brush Hill Road to travel up Brush Hill Road toward Curry College. And it's risky now. And with a change or a proposal to have a new entryway into the development, I think that creates chaos, even more chaos. And I don't know if any provisions are being made to address that.
Cliff, do you want to address the question, please?
Sure, I'm not the traffic guy, but the previous proposal was there was a gate across that would only be opened in the case of emergencies. So that, again, I'm not the traffic guy, but that would, I think, clearly have very limited consequences, given that it would be limited to emergency situations. Tonight, we're all hearing for the first time the idea of making that an entryway that would be used by residents as well as emergency vehicles. So I think you heard it the first time. At the same time, all of us have heard it. And I think the jury's out on how well that would work or wouldn't work.
Let me ask Mr. Dumay, are you still there, Mr. Dumay? And perhaps you want to address this resident's question?
Yeah, I'm here. The driveway we're looking at would be into the site only. It was a recommendation to look at from the fire chief, so we put that on there. Given the low volume nature of the project, we didn't think it would be a detrimental increase to the intersection. But I do understand the trickiness of that movement from Amar to Brush Hill, that left turn. It's just the people on Brush Hill are trying to go straight through to Brush Hill on the Parkway portion. And you're trying to make like a more than a U-turn to get onto that road. So I understand it's very difficult.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Dumay. Appreciate it very much. Crystal, are there any other questions from members of the public?
Monica Curley.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Monica Carley. Live in 17 Cheever Street. And my question is, and it's actually for Mr. Dumay, how are you going to guarantee that people won't actually exit from the gate that is supposedly just a one-way system now?
So the design would include a channelization, so make it very difficult to go out and make that right turn. It'll also be signed, do not enter as well as one way entering from the site side. So if you'd be looking at big do not enter signs in one way, and then just the geometry itself, you kind of restrict it down as much as possible to make that movement very difficult and not very desirable.
Okay. And so my other question is, well, it's not even a question, it's a concern about people crossing. So if I were to leave that site and try and get a train from, say, Hyde Park, you're kind of proposing that I'd have to walk all the way up to Aberdeen to cross the street to go back down to Hyde Park? Is that what I was understanding, or no?
That'd be correct if you're going to go down the Parkway to the southwest.
Okay. And the likelihood of that actually happening is probably really limited. I live in Cheever. I don't walk up to Aberdeen. I cross at Cheever all the way across. So I think realistically, people are not going to follow that plan. But thank you.
Crystal, anybody else out there who has a question of Mr. Palmer or Mr. Dumay?
No, there's no one else.
Okay. Thank all the members of the public for listening in and participating in the hearing. Mr. Shoma, do you have anything else you'd like to add this evening, or are you content with our adjourning to the next hearing, which I believe is scheduled for Wednesday, April 27th, 2022?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Nothing further substantive from us tonight. What I would suggest that we do following tonight is try to make arrangements with Cliff, Sean, and Tim and Judy and our team for a working session to go through the details of their peer review reports and how we can address the issues that we've talked about tonight. And at the same time, we'll continue to study the issues relating to the layout of the intersection and whether that can be improved and what the process for doing that is. My sense is that there may not be a lot to update the board with by the next hearing at the end of this month. But I would suggest that we go ahead and hold the date just in case there is an update and we keep the meeting on the books. And perhaps if we've had a productive first meeting with Sean and Cliff, we would perhaps come back and request a continuance so we can keep working. But that would be my suggestion for tonight, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense as far as I'm concerned. Let me just ask my fellow board members if they have any further questions, comments, or suggestions. Brian Conley, do you have anything else you'd like to add to this particular hearing?
No, Mr. Chairman, nothing further on my end.
Okay, and Giselle Joffer, do you have any issues or questions you want to ask or suggestions?
No, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, and Tim Zawinski, on behalf of the town, are you content with Mr. Schomer's suggestions that hopefully you can have an omnibus an omnibus meeting to discuss these various issues and make progress and get back to us before the 27th as to whether you want to keep that particular hearing or you want to bump it back a little bit to further refine the possible changes in the plan.
That works for me.
Okay, so if.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Yes, sir.
Just a question. I think the developer agreed to provide test pit, do some additional test pits. I think Mr. Reardon had requested relative to location of rock, etc. And I'm wondering whether additional test pits have been performed, A, B, if not, when, and C, whether they have encountered groundwater and at what depth groundwater has been encountered in the performance of those test pits. I do point out that the only two test pits that were performed in a drought condition in August of 2019, and no groundwater was encountered at all. But most of the homes in this area have sump pumps that run during this time of the year. The groundwater table is actually fairly high, and I think that's important to understand relative to the engineering and the stormwater components of this project.
Okay, Mr. Shulman, do you want to address Attorney Corcoran's questions, or do you prefer to defer those till the 27th and address them at that time?
No, I think we can discuss them at least in overview now. My understanding, and Paul Matos from Allen and Major can elaborate on this, but my understanding is that additional test pits have been done on the site. And there's Paul, just on cue. Paul, could you please?
Yep, we did do 4 additional test pits on March 2nd. We did 4 test pits that were located within the drainage area systems. All 4 test pits were consistent with what was done originally. There was, we did not hit any ledge on any of the test pits. We went down deeper than what the other ones went, from anywhere from 116 inches, or about 9.5 feet, to 12 feet at 144 inches. We did have 1 test pit, the one that was closest to Brush Hill Road, that we did encounter some water coming in at 90 inches below grade. So we'll just have to modify our drainage system for that 1 test pit that was down by the Brush Hill intersection, closest to that ledge rock outcrop that was there at the intersection.
Mr. Corcoran, do you have any follow-up questions on that?
Yeah, will he be filing that the test pit analysis with the board for review?
Yeah, we plan on putting those. We do plan on putting those on a revised set of plans once we do submit a revised set of plans showing any new changes that may occur, but those test pits will be shown on those plans.
And when would you reasonably expect that that information would actually be filed with the board?
Like I said, I was going to put them on the set of revised plans. So whenever we do submit a set of revised plans, it would be shown there. But if you want us to submit it prior to, we could do that too.
Well, it may be helpful to submit just information that relate to Mr. Corcoran's questions, which are discrete, and then follow up with larger plans at a later date. So if you could do that certainly before the next hearing, that would be very helpful.
Okay.
Great. Thank you.
Just to further add to that, Mr. Chair, the only reason why we had held off on filing that information previously is we didn't want to have piecemeal submissions. We thought it would better to have everything come in at the same time. But if you and the peer reviewers would find it helpful, and Mr. Corcoran and his consultants would find it helpful to have that information sooner, we can get it in as soon as possible.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very discrete information that Mr. Corcoran's asking for, and I agree with you. Generally speaking, we don't want to have 582 submissions. We won't understand who's on first base, but I think that can be easily done without confusing the record, and it will help Mr. Corcoran in the representation of his clients. So that would be.
Mr. Chair, if I could add, that would be helpful for us too, and it also inform us for our discussions, our working sessions as well.
Okay, great. I appreciate your chiming in. So without further ado, if nobody has any questions, comments, or issues to raise, what we're going to do is adjourn this hearing, thanking everyone for their participation this evening. We'll adjourn it to April 27th, 2022 at 7 p.m. And in the interim, we wish everyone stay safe and be well, and look forward to seeing you on the 27th. So we'll be adjourned.
Thank you.
Everybody.
Thank you.
Nice seeing all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.